Hello there, you're very welcome along to the Huddle Breakdown. Loads to talk about today. Celtic's 2-0 win over AZ Alkmaar will be our main focus, the Europa League playoff last night. That and a couple of movements in the transfer window as well. Alan Morrison, Celtic by Numbers, is on the line with me as always. Alan, how are you?
Yeah, good, thanks, Enda.
And Jaco James as well. James, how are you?
Good. And Alan, you should disclose you're at your country estate.
Yeah,
Morrison Country Estate. That's why your background's different.
Yeah, it's the weekend retreat this time.
It's looking nice. It's kind of like Buckingham Palace or something like that. Mirror in the background and the Rule Britannia ships on top of it.
Crikey.
So Celtic 2, AZ Alkmaar 0. I don't think any of us expected this to happen. Celtic pretty much dominant for large parts of the game last night. Kyogo with the first and James Forrest with the second, courtesy of a very heavy deflection. It went down as an OG in the end, but James Forrest with the shot that ended up being Celtic's second goal. Celtic beating the third best team in the Eredivisie last season, and it's all looking rosy once again at Celtic Park. I should say that we are the Huddle Breakdown. We're streaming on YouTube right now, so if you're watching on YouTube, leave us a comment below. Let us know what you thought of the game last night. And we're streaming for the first time on Twitch as well. You can find us on Twitch. Official Breakdown Inc. is the name of the Twitch channel. As you have noticed, the YouTube channel has changed as well. You can follow Breakdown Inc. on Twitter as well. That's where the home of all these podcasts are going to be over the next couple of weeks. So make sure you give those two accounts a follow.
I could tell by Alan's face there, he's a big gamer. He's a live streamer when he's playing Fortnite. I could tell.
I recognize you said the word Twitch, but I'm still processing it in my mind as to what that could possibly mean.
If you're like Alan and you don't know what Twitch is an alternative way to watch it. You can just search Twitch on Google and it'll come up and will pop up in your screens as well. So anyway, more important things to talk about. Celtic 2-0 against AZ Alkmaar, an exciting game and a phenomenal result really when you think about where Celtic were 6 weeks ago. So I guess we'll start with general thoughts in the game. James, do you want to go first here? What did you make of the win in Celtic Park last night?
Great entertainment product. I think that was the, it's just been terrific the last couple of weeks. Watching entertaining football. I mean, it's just, it's so enjoyable. Obviously with the results having been in our favor, we'll see when we stress test that, when they might dip a little bit at some point, theoretically. But yeah, I mean, it was just a really exciting, interesting game, not only live as just kind of a fan enjoying it, but then when I woke up this morning to do my analysis, it was a really interesting game to analyze too. So, kind of 360 all around. I just thought it was a really enjoyable game. And the result, obviously, I mean, that's being a European knockout. That's all that really matters ultimately. What we'll talk about today, probably a little bit more, is what the performance yesterday might maybe indicate as we head into next week. Because I think the performance was a lot less definitive than the result would indicate. So we'll talk about that. But yeah, I mean, I just tremendous excitement seeing the guys flying around and the energy levels and the intensity. Having Edouard doing a thrusting header, putting his body at risk late in the game. That's the kind of thing that was symptomatic of really the effort that was put forth, I think, holistically. So it was great.
Alan, I listened to you and James in my absence last week, and I guess the general feeling around Celtic at the minute were, yeah, it's great beating Dundee 6-0, and it's great getting that result against Hearts, but bigger opposition, tougher opposition, better opposition. It's going to be very interesting to see how Iron stands up. He went brave. He went with Callum McGregor as a number 6 again last night. Brave won the game essentially here, Alan.
Yeah, I mean, brave as well to put Edouard back on the bench and bring Abada, a 19-year-old kid, back in. So that surprised me, I'll be honest, but that was brave. Listen, I know we say sometimes warning about the standard of the opposition when you win 6-0, but listen, last season we didn't get games like that. And when you're racking up 4-5, averaging 3 XG a game, I'm sorry, but there's something seriously going on there underlying those numbers, right? And the question was more, could they translate that against what is a very good side? And I know they've probably lost a few players, but you could see in terms of their shape, their approach to the game, this was a very well organized team with a very firm idea about how they wanted to play. as James said, absolutely fascinating match. Aside from the great entertainment, again, and that is the theme of the season. Hopefully, is this is just massively entertaining. On the one hand, it looked like they were going to be very similar in the way that they approached the game to Celtic, in terms of under Postecoglou, in terms of a 4-3-3, in terms of pressing whenever they could, and in terms of very, very aggressive attacking intent. But I think there was the subtle difference between the teams was that I think AZ wanted to get the ball forward as quickly as they could. They wanted to break lines as quickly as they could, and if they lost possession, it was they're a bit like an upmarket Cluj in that respect. I mean, Cluj just wanted to get the ball forward and then win 50-50s and breaks of the ball. AZ are far more sophisticated than that, far better players, but in principle, they wanted to get the ball forward really, really quickly. Whereas Celtic under Postecoglou will tend to want to get the ball forward, but they tend to want to control the game. And I felt happy in the moments when Celtic were controlling the game. So between probably after scoring all the way through to probably 5 minutes before halftime, I felt Celtic had excellent control of the match and control of the ball. And then that 5 minutes before halftime when AZ won a series of corners, and then the next, and that's into was that from round about the 67th minute, I don't think they had another shot at goal. We saw a different side of Postecoglou where he brought on McCarthy and Montgomery, took off Rogic, Kyogo, and we saw a more. We dropped back to a sort of medium block, and although we let them have a lot of the ball, we actually controlled the game. And although there was a few moments when the ball was skidding about the box, but no shots really. And then Celtic could have had a third near the end. And so that those two periods really gave me encouragement that we've got the flexibility to have that helter-skelter attacking play. And let's be honest, Celtic's goals for them were absolute killer because they had great big chances and then Celtic scored, and that happened twice. And that's a real kick in the teeth for any team. But what I liked was the flexibility that Postecoglou started to introduce and the way that we managed to get control for periods. But again, it's such a work in progress. There's so many things that need improving on, and how we kept a clean sheet when two of our defenders had absolute nightmares is quite incredible.
Yeah. There's a lot to unpack there, and I mean, it was a great win, and it's fantastic to win 2-0. It certainly wasn't a complete whitewash. AZ had chances, especially in the first 10 minutes. Joe Hart pulled off a save, which I don't know to this day we'll ever figure out how he managed to get his foot on that shot to keep it out. And if that goes in, it's a completely different game. So that, I mean, these are the moments that went against Celtic last year that are suddenly, just about starting to go our way. And as I see the comments coming in, the main man that people wanted to talk about here, Anthony Ralston. I mean, Celtic, I did a video on the channel. You can check it out with Boys Analytics about Josip Juranovic, who's coming in from Legia Warsaw. He's coming in at right back. Initially, I was recording that as if he was coming in to start. I'm not so sure he comes in now and pushes Tony Ralston out of that position, because he was phenomenal last night, James.
He was excellent. I'm going to be the Debbie Downer as usual, though.
Oh, here we go.
Well, I feel like I have some credibility on this, because I think I was one of the lone people on the desert island that was not horribly negative about Anthony Ralston in the last year plus, including when he got the year contract extension. So the pendulum has swung fully from people thinking he should be thrown over the ship to now he should be the captain of the ship. Yeah. And I think the truth, as often is the case, lies somewhere in the middle. I think there was two extenuating circumstances yesterday that helped his performance. One is they're playing a midfielder at left back, Oosting. And he's a young guy, so he doesn't have a lot of experience playing left back. And their starting left winger was out because of a red card that he got in the last Europa League game last December for them. And he's one of their best players, Clarlson. I think he's a Swedish international. So they kind of swapped. If you look at the game progression, they kind of flipped Alkmaar, again, me with names. Number 17 and Goodmanson, I think, is the other guy that they kind of flipped back and forth between right and left. And Goodmanson was not good. I mean, he had a pretty poor game. So I think some of that, I mean, Ralston obviously contributed to that in creating some pressure, but they followed the path that a lot of teams have been following, which is they were targeting our defensive left. So if you look at kind of the standard balls received, duels, passes made, I mean, we were left heavy again in attack as well. So a lot of the game went down our left, and that left a lot of space, and Ralston used it terrifically. And, he made that great run and the cross at the end. So he played really, really well. I'm not, taking that away from him. I think it's a question of, circumstances. I want to see him hopefully play next Thursday and do really well. And I think the test at Ibrox a few days later would be a big one too. So as usual, I want to see more evidence. He deserves huge credit. I think he's come on. He's certainly developing and getting better within the system. I think the other thing, I'm probably going to share it when I retweet my thread from this morning later. And I'm sure Alan saw this live, whereas I had to look at the action maps afterwards. He did invert a little bit in the game. Taylor did not. Taylor did not invert at all. So I think that was another adjustment that Ange made, but it also speaks to how left dominant the game was, meaning that our defensive left. So Taylor, for the most part, was pinned wide, and Ralston was coming towards the ball into that midfield space. And we saw that with Abada too early. I mean, there was just a lot of space on the right. So whether it was through design, some combination of design, and then also who they had playing on that side, I think the circumstances benefited him. And he's certainly, like I said, he deserves all the credit in the world for taking advantage of it and performing really well. I just continue to be concerned about, as I've said, how does it scale? And we'll see when Clarlson plays next week, probably, assuming he's fit. I don't know why he wouldn't be. And being away and how that looks. So very helpful. I just, I always get nervous when people go berserk. And I think,
that's always going to happen with Celtic fans.
Of course. And that's part of what, analytics is all about, is trying to cut out some of the extreme emotional swings. And so, like I said, I was extremely positive on Ralston. I did a whole write-up on him and how his age 21, a lot of people just really trashed him in his season at St. Johnston. And I looked at the data, and again, I don't pretend to watch him at St. Johnston, and he didn't play against Celtic for the obvious reason. So when I looked at his data, it was like his age 21 season looked as good, if not better, than Taylor's at Kilmarnock under Steve Clark. So that's why I wasn't horribly negative. And his profile was one of where he was deficient was more technical, not athletic, meaning that he's got some pace, he's got some size, he's a strong guy, he plays hard. And I thought that might translate better once he gets managed by Ange. And that so far is the case. It looks like anyway. And his technical part of it's kind of picking up a little bit. So I'm the other part of this last thing I'll say is we're probably going to play 60 games. And even Ange said that after the game. I mean, who's the starter technically in some of these positions is not irrelevant, but whether it's a 60-40 split one way or the other, these guys are going to have to timeshare because of how demanding these positions are. Yeah. And otherwise you're going to have hamstrings blown out right and left, or guys doing their ACLs. I mean, so the risks of injury are going to go up as time goes on here. And the way he's been playing, I mean, he's been going balls to the wall for a month now. And
he hadn't built up a lot of games before this as well. So you have to take that into account as well. This is not a saying. I think I'm making this up, but the general point, I think there is a real saying that I can't actually remember here, but I guess one good dinner doesn't make a chef is essentially the idea that I'm trying to get across here. Tony Ralston, I know I've been calling him Cafu on my Twitter account, but I mean, that's just tongue in cheek in a little bit, but I think it's brilliant to see him playing well. Can he sustain this across 40 games this season? time will tell. Time will only tell, because we haven't seen that with Ralston in his career so far. So let's hope he does. Let's hope he does maintain this. Alan, do you want to have a word on Ralston, or do you want to move across the defence?
No, I will, because I did actually, since I've started this whole Celtic by numbers thing, that responding to that kind of emotional extremism that you get about players, it was very much what I spend a lot of my time not having to do. It's fun because, the data gives you a lot more context to the performances, and it's interesting to bring those out. So I naturally wanted to look at Ralston, and really, we had a fullback last year, Kenny, who was much derided and everybody hated. And but nevertheless, was an experienced player, an international Premier League player, and so I compared the two. And if I go through these, so listen, people are going to switch off now, and everyone's going to hate me even more than some of them do already, right? But I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this because it's important, and I spend the time, getting the data right.
Brass balls, Alan. Brass balls. I love it.
Yep. So listen. Ralston scored 2 goals this season, but that's coming off of 0.07 expected goals per 90 minutes. Kenny was 0.04. Nothing much in that. Ralston hasn't got any assists this season. This is coming, and he averages about 0.18 expected assists per game. Kenny was 0.25. Ralston manages 1.5 key passes per 90 minutes. Kenny was about 1.25, so just below. Looking at defensive performance, so your defensive action success rate and possessions won. Ralston 54% and 62%, Kenny 59% and 69%. That's probably surprised a few people. Kenny, they both lose about the same number of challenges per 90 minutes, but Kenny wins nearly one more challenge than Ralston. Pack passes, so this is progressive passes. Ralston has a slight edge, 7.2 to Kenny's 6.4. But again, that could be down to just the style and the way that the team are playing. In terms of receiving the ball, receiving forward passes, this is where massive difference. Ralston, I think, is one of the weaker parts of his game is his movement off the ball, and he receives about 7 forward passes a game. With Kenny, it was over 13. And finally, in terms of ball carries, Ralston again has a few more, 2.7 ball carries per 90 minutes, and Kenny had just 2. But, there's really not a lot between those two. And if anything, what the data says is that Kenny was a bit more defensively sound, and everybody hated Kenny. But actually, again, context is everything. If we're saying that actually Ralston's performing at the same level as a very experienced Irish international who's an experienced English Premier League player, then actually that's credit to 22, 23-year-old Ralston, I would say. But listen, let's not go overboard. You hated Kenny for pretty much the same numbers last season.
Yeah, Alan, that is so brilliant, because it really is about narratives and context. So much of how we perceive these things is because of kind of the mob mentality, and I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean in that there's a communal sense of emotion that takes place, and whether you're winning has a huge impact on how all of this stuff gets interpreted from an emotional perspective. So. That was great. I mean, I didn't think of doing that kind of comparison. And to your point, I mean, what did Kenny go for? I mean, something like 10 or 15 million at one point, I think, at Everton, right? I mean, so
yeah,
so right, something like that. I mean, it was a big number, whatever it was. It was a heck of a lot of what, so for even if Kenny didn't play great during his stretch, or people interpreted that in a fairly dysfunctional side, again, I think that's a credit to Ralston that he's up to that kind of standard, even though I think some of the Kenny stuff was big mistakes, glaring errors that people just feel so much more because of the context of the misery that we were all enduring at the time. And I don't think Ralston's had a big mistake yet either.
No, sorry.
Kenny was also playing Lenny ball. Like that's
right.
The reality of it as well.
Yeah, Ralston's error rate is really low, actually, which is great. And Kenny's was actually below my red flag status, but higher than Ralston's. Kenny has been at Everton for a long time as a kid, actually, and he's never been transferred, but he's been loaned out a lot.
Okay.
Like I said earlier on, this wasn't exactly a dominant performance. So I think there were a couple of key issues. There was a mistake from Starfelt in the first half that almost led to a penalty. Probably should have been a penalty. I thought the referee might have got that wrong. But there was a couple of big decisions as well, or big saves rather, from Mr. Joe Hart, who has gained a lot of already fanfare because he can save a shot because he's keeping the ball out of the net in moments that we might perceive that Barkas may not have. I'm not going to say he definitely wouldn't have, but he may not have. Last night, I don't think Barkas is saving that one in the first half. James, your thoughts on Joe Hart's transition to the club so far? I know you're skeptical about it. We all were skeptical about him. I'm starting to come around to him. I think he's done well. What have you made of him so far?
Yeah, I mean, his shot stopping so far has been good. So, you know, I didn't lambaste him like some people did when Jablonec scored the 2 goals, which for the most part, you know, were not his fault. You know, he might have maybe been a little bit better on the one, but again, nothing that you would hang a guy over or certainly be critical, I think. Yesterday's were both good. I mean, I actually posted about that this morning. I mean, part of what I did when his signing occurred was look back at all his data back to 2015-16, which was over 15,000 minutes. And this was the third best performance out of that time frame relative to post-shot XG. So, you know, so again, this comes back to how we perceive things. So is he going to perform at that level consistently over time? I actually think that would be unrealistic. That would be unfair on him to expect that, because, you know, it's just not. Forster didn't perform like that consistently. I mean, it's just not. It's not realistic. I think that I think that some of the skepticism remains justified, mostly relative to how he's being used. Meaning that he's definitely not being used the same way that Bain and Barkas were, or that Ange's keepers have in the past, at least at Marinos. So again, you can get into whether that's good or bad. That's a totally, you know, fair debate. But he did have one really bad clearance yesterday where he came wide right, and you know, again, I think that's ultimately going to be where the risk profile for him is, even assuming that he's, you know, his shot stopping is kind of quote unquote old Joe Hart, which is, you know, he's around average or maybe even a little bit better average at shot stopping. I think most of the risk for him is going to be with his feet coming outside of the box. And that, you know, very easily he tried to clear it. It went right off of an AZ player and happened to bounce favorably. Whereas again, on another day kind of thing, it very easily could have bounced in the wrong direction and led to a pretty open shot. So that's, you know, always talking about risk and thinking about how these things are going to persist, not over 1 game or 2 games or 3 games, but over, like we said, he's probably going to play 55 to 60 games. So, you know, it was a great performance, had 2 huge saves, and hopefully that continues. And that's I think that's what the hope is. We'll just have to wait and see.
Alan, Joe Hart, he has played an important role. Interesting that, and I want you to bring the numbers to the table. I'm just going to say that it was interesting that Joe Hart rather pulled Ange aside last night when the game was in the doldrums. Celtic were under pressure. He's showing leadership. I'm going to say he's showing leadership. What have you made of Joe Hart so far, and have you any sort of data to back up what he's brought to the table?
Sure. Yeah. No, I mean, generally positive. I completely agree with James, sadly, in terms of the risk around his passing. I mean, I think he's settled a bit. I think in the first game, he just looked like he didn't know what he was doing in terms of, you know, playing with the ball. But listen, he's 34 years old. He's a big guy. He's bigger than the other goalkeepers. He's 6'5", you know, and obviously with his age profile, he just physically isn't going to be as mobile around the pitch as Barkas and Bain are. Who are younger and probably lighter on their feet as individuals, and probably it seems more natural to them. I think he's done okay. It doesn't, you know, when Starfelt and him and Welsh are knocking the ball between themselves, it doesn't look comfortable. It really doesn't. And he's really weak on his left side, which is a real blow as well in terms of kicking. And yeah, some of his clearances where he's rushed a bit turn into these little 8-iron lobs, which fall into the middle of Celtic's half, and that's happened a few times. And Jablonic's first goal was on the back of one of those. So those are all absolutely extant risks, and would still be a concern to me. I mean, I was just looking; he's completed 153 passes, and he's given away, 23. So it's pretty decent, to be honest, in terms of just that raw data. This doesn't include last night. I don't have that passing data yet. In terms of shot stopping, again, this is not including last night, but he should be conceding, expected goals says he should be conceding just over 1 goal a game based on post shot XG, and he's actually conceding 1. He's just above the line in terms of he's saving slightly more than you'd expect, and that will go up quite a bit on the basis of last night. So that's good because Bain and Barkas were both kind of below that line, so that is encouraging. But I think and to your point, and where you were going in terms of you used the word leadership. So this is where James will that's where we'll get James's backup. What I believe and think he has brought to the team is just a confidence. He just brought a confidence to the back division. They feel better, I think, in themselves having him behind them. He's vociferous. He's well organized. He commands respect, and that in that sense, he seems to be a very good guy to have around in terms of his positivity when he's interviewed. He seems very humble. He seems to really be happy to be here, which is great. And as you say, last night he was happy to kind of show some leadership in being proactive about making suggestions about how things can be organised, and then going straight to Callum McGregor and saying but I've spoken to the boss, I'm speaking to you. Do you think this is what we should do? That all instills confidence in players, and that is an intangible. But it is very, as we all know in sport, the difference in performance when you're lacking confidence versus when you're feeling confident is pretty significant.
Mm-hmm. There is loads that we want to talk about in the second part of the show. This is the Huddle Breakdown. If you're watching us on YouTube, be sure to hit the subscribe button below. Like the video as well so more people can see them. We're also on Twitch. You might have noticed that the channel got a bit of a rebrand. It's now called Breakdown Inc. We're going to be expanding. There's going to be a couple of new shows coming your way in the next couple of weeks. So really excited to bring you that. And we're also really excited. We want to take this opportunity to say that the Manscaped engineering team has confirmed that they have successfully created the Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer, which is now available to purchase in the EU and UK. This new trimmer was released just moments ago, and we got our hands on it. We're delighted to share the news with you now. Join over 2 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped with this exclusive offer. 20% off and free shipping with the code HBD for Huddle Breakdown, obviously HBD at manscaped.com. The Lawnmower 4.0 is slick. It's wireless. You can turn a light on so you don't cut your balls when you're shaving. That's very important. And if you're brave enough to shave your balls in the shower, it's also waterproof as well. How did I keep a straight face when doing that? Because I'm an absolute pro, and Manscaped are starting to fund this page. So it's great to have them on board. It's great to have a sponsor on board as well. Get 20% off and free shipping with the code HBD at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com. Use the code HBD. Unlock your confidence. And as always, use the right tool for the right job. You don't want to be shaving your face with the same trimmer that you shave your balls with. That's one thing that we can tell you here on the Huddle Breakdown. Let's move on. I got
to address this. So Alan, this is going to be for Alan, because you probably don't know this, Enda. Alan might remember the Johnny Carson show back in the Tonight Show way back, and Ed McMahon. I felt like an unprofessional Ed McMahon there, laughing very loud in the middle of that. So I apologize for being unprofessional.
Listen, it's all good. It's all good. Red Scotland is getting in touch in the comments saying, "Oh, mate, quit hawking products." Listen, we do this for virtually free. I say virtually free. We're basically doing it for free. So listen, if manscaped.com allows us to do this over the next couple of weeks, that's all we want. We want to keep bringing in this content. It makes it much easier for us to keep the Huddle Breakdown on the road and keep it progressing and improving and improve the technology that we're using. So that's why we're absolutely delighted to have them on board. Hopefully they'll be on board for the rest of the season. Let's move on to the forward line against AZ Alkmaar. I'm going to go with AZ. The commentary team were calling them AZ last night. I wasn't really okay with that. James Forrest, anyway, he was starting on the left-hand side again. Now, Ryan Christie was not ready for this game. He had a niggle. So that played into the fact that James Forrest was playing on the left. But I guess because of all the fact that AZ were targeting the left-hand side, it was probably blown out a little bit more. But I want to get your guys' opinion on James Forrest playing on the left, because initially I thought it was working. Last night, I'm not too sure. So, Alan, do you want to start off with us on James Forrest?
Yeah, I was looking at this and trying to see whether there was any real difference in performance based on whether he starts on the right or the left. And in all honesty, I couldn't find anything particularly interesting. You know, I mean, he had a really good game against Hearts. Obviously, he was terrific in terms of, you know, over 1.2 sort of expected goals and assists, and he started on the right. But then similarly against Dundee, he was obviously, as were most of the team, incredibly productive starting on the left. And he's kind of 50-50 this season, starting on the right, starting on the left. Last season was obviously very injury hit. He did start some games on the left. So I couldn't see a huge compelling reason to say, oh, we must start either one side or the other, because I think for me, Forrest is turning into, you know, quite an intelligent footballer. He doesn't have that blistering pace that he had when he was a kid, when he would just knock the ball and just sprint past people. He does try and go past people on occasion, but he's more really looking just to get a half yard and get a cross in, if he's on the right or even on the left. He'll do that, and his left foot is actually, I think, improved. But often he'll be really trying to get himself into the box and central positions, and it's quite natural for a right-sided player making a diagonal run into the box if the ball's then coming onto the right foot. And Abada is similar on the other side. So I think that works well with how Ange wants to play and how he wants the wingers to invert and get into central positions to get shots away. So I don't have an issue with it. I probably need more data, I suppose, to really be definitive about that. There may be a difference. He probably looks a little bit more awkward on the left, and I'd probably just feel a bit more. I guess my feng shui would be aligned if he was on the right. But I don't necessarily have the data to back that up, if I'm being honest.
Yeah. I actually did a study on that. I don't remember when. I'm getting old now, so it all bleeds together. I can't remember if it was I was probably in the winter of 20 before the shutdowns, but basically looking at left versus right, and at least going back to 15-16, it was pretty much a toss-up, man. That he from cross rate, accuracy, XA, XG, all those kind. Because the question then was, well, can he play wing back? Can he play? I even played some left wing back at some points. So in the 3-5-2. So yeah, I think for the most part, again, I'm going off memory. I'd have to look it up specifically, but I'm 99% sure when I looked at it, his output was pretty comparable, whether it was on the right or the left. So just throw that in there, that it actually had done that. Yeah.
I almost broke out laughing there, because I think it's the funniest comment we're ever going to get on the channel. So I just want to read it out. Nicholas McDade said that it's called capitalism, you commie bastard. Well, James is American, so we have to go along.
Oh, come on!
It's in their nature. It's in their nature. Right, let's move on to. Let's keep it football. So, we touched on James Forrest. We've touched on Anthony Ralston and his improvements. I'm sort of scared to go down the Starfelt route, so we'll keep it positive with Tom Rogic. I want to talk about Tom Rogic because he's been playing on the right side of the midfield, with Cal McGregor playing as the holding six in this new sort of more brave formation that Ange has gone for. So, James, your thoughts on Tom Rogic, his revitalization? He was almost off the guitar a couple of years ago.
Yep.
Like, is he? You touched on him as potential starter under Ange, and that has come to fruition. So, interested to get your thoughts on his general output.
Yeah. So he's it's all about the asymmetry of Rogic. So, can we get enough in attack out of him and creatively to offset what we're going to lose in pressing and, kind of transition, so to speak. So I pulled back. I reserved a couple of interesting metrics for the show here that I didn't share in my thread this morning. But if you look at, kind of what Alan talks about with pack passes, his metric. Y Scout has something that's a distant cousin, let's say. It's not as good as Alan's. It doesn't have the scoring that he does, but it's a decent proxy. And it's called progressive passes. And yesterday, Celtic conceded the highest amount of progressive passes to an opponent at home in Europe that wasn't of the Salzburg, Milan, Lazio level, right? So Alkmaar is not that level. I mean, they're a good team. The only team below that kind of next tier, where you would say they're kind of a top 25, 30 team in Europe. At least a Lazio was when we played them. I mean, they fell off subsequently to that. But at that season, at that time, they were performing right at the top of Serie A. Was Rosenborg, and that was against 10 men. We lost in Cham to a red card late in the first half. So that gives you an idea about the degree to which they were bypassing our defensive lines and kind of taking out our defenders. So all told, that risk benefit yesterday nudged it favorably because he had that brilliant cross, and Kyogo happened to be able to finish it with a brilliant finish. I'm concerned about, as we head back next week, again, the introduction of Carlson maybe for them on the left, some of those transitions that we had down our defensive right, which is basically Rogic's side, where, that led to a couple of the really good chances, including that great Hart save early, came down that side. So I'm still nervous about that relative risk and reward. And again, as long as he's doing the creative stuff, it's at least debatable. I think if we have a game where he doesn't offer that and we're still vulnerable in those ways in transitions and defensively, then it could get pretty nasty quick. That's my concern anyway.
Mm-hmm. Alan, do you want to come in on Tom Rogic?
Yeah, fascinating player. Obviously playing slightly more as an 8 really than a 10 because of the 4-3-3 system. There's flexibility. Players move around a lot, but he actually Rogic has never had the highest expected assist levels in the team, which might be a surprise to people because I think he does eye-catching things, but he doesn't necessarily do a lot of them, if I can put it that way. His expected goals this season is actually pretty high. It's nearly 0.5, at 0.46 it is. His expected assist is just under 0.3, which is the lowest of any of the forward players, which may surprise people. And again, his passing is much lower than Turnbull, for example. So actually, you add that in, and also add the fact in that he actually wins less challenges than Turnbull. Now, bear in mind, and this is a remarkable thing, not including last night, as I say, I haven't captured the data yet, but in the 3 games that Turnbull moved from a more of a 10 role to an 8 role, he hasn't won a single challenge. Now, Celtic have been very dominant in those games, and it may be that that he's not had to. And actually, he started the season not particularly creating a lot in a more advanced role. But he really embraced the pressing from the front, Turnbull. The point I'm trying to make is that you've now got 2 players who really don't win many challenges. Turnbull at least is packing the hell out of other teams. I mean, he's got his packing score has been over 100 in 3 games running, which is just remarkable. And obviously his dead ball play as well, and his goal threat. Rogic, he has these moments, and he looks wonderful on occasion, and his ability to take the ball under pressure, even in Celtic's defensive third, and then start to build the play is remarkable sometimes. But he doesn't actually post the numbers that you might think he does in a creative sense.
Right.
And in that sense, I hate to use the term a luxury player because it's a kind of lazy analogy, and it's often thrown at players who are quite elegant and maybe don't do a lot of power running, but and got a bit of skill. But he really isn't as productive as I suspect a number 8 in Postecoglou's team needs to be. Mm. And if you look at his output compared to Ryan Christie, for example, who would be absolutely made for that 8 role and hasn't been played there, or where he has once for a half, and he was outstanding against Dundee as an 8. I would say there'd be no comparison. So again, sorry to disappoint people, but
Well,
a little bit down. But them's the numbers.
I was actually going to call him a luxury player.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I apologize for that. I know that's lazy.
Well,
lazy
now
language.
I'll just add something to what Alan said as far as the high XG. That's largely been on quantity over quality. I think he's almost at 4 shots a game, which for him, that's high for a midfielder generally, and certainly for an 8. I think that's, I haven't looked, but I'm guessing that's probably, similar to what Christie's been doing, only at the wing, or Kyogo even. I mean, that's a high number. I mean, that's more striker level average number of shots. So, and I think out of them, over half or right around half are from outside the box. So he has the 1 goal. So I agree with Alan in the sense that he looks so brilliant on some of the specific instances, like that cross yesterday. I mean, that was a terrific. It was just a great movement and then a tremendous cross. And I think that leaves people understandably mesmerized with the brilliance. But I think the totality, and that's why I mentioned that not the pack passing, the progressive passing issue, is that particularly as we go over there next week, the other number I had to put this into perspective. So again, I don't know if you did your XG number yet, Alan, but Y-Scout had them at 1.46, and that's more than what that's non-penalty. That's more than what PSG had when they beat us 5-0 at home, right?
Funnily enough, I had them at 1.46. So
okay, yes, and that's as Ross from Boys Analytics pinpointed, that was with one huge glaring opportunity that the guy DeWitt made a really bad decision where a guy was played through dead center. Could have been one of these 0.6 type of XG opportunities had the guy made a smart pass. So even at 1, let's call it 1.5, that's the kind of that's more than what we conceded against Cluj when we lost 4-3. That was more than like 4 times more than what we conceded against Ferencváros. So when we talk about, as Alan and I always talk about, single game XG is, it's not a great thing to rely too much upon, but what it does is it creates kind of in my mind, almost like a volatility band, meaning that when you're conceding that much in chances, if you have the other team has a good game finishing and, or you just have some bad luck, you can easily give up 3-4 goals in that kind of game. And that's as we're heading in, that's why I'm concerned heading into next week, is if we just post that kind of performance defensively again, they could score 3 or 4 goals. And with us, I think we'll score against them. But now even with a 2-goal lead heading back there, so that's some of these enduring issues in midfield and at the back. You mentioned Starfelt, where, as they say, on another day, very easily could see a game where it's tilted the other direction, unfortunately.
Yeah, I would describe Tom Rogic as the perfect cult player. He's going to be a cult hero in 10, 15 years' time that people talk about him. And he was the absolute word beater on his best, but absolutely does nothing on his worst. So I think luxury is too easy a phrase to describe him, because I think people love Tom Rogic. I love Tom Rogic. I think he's one of the best players that Celtic have had in the last decade at least, but he doesn't do it often enough is essentially one of the issues with Tom Rogic in my eyes. There's a question from Warsavi that we might dedicate a whole show to, because I mean it's so broad. He's asking loads of conversation about the 6, 8, and 10 roles more recently. Could we clarify the differences? We might do a show on that, because I mean that differs from the system, the tactics, whatever the manager chooses to play. In my mind, the 6 is the holding, the 8 is the engine, and the 10 is the creative spark that links the forward and the attack. That's a very basic way of describing it, but it depends on the system as well. So we will do a full show on that. Before we finish up, then we'll move on from the AZ Alkmaar game. We'll come back to that next week after we play the second leg. There's a triple signing coming in, essentially, by the looks of it. Josip Juranovic is coming in as a right back from Legia Warsaw. That seems to be getting over the line on Friday. He's due to fly in from Poland. Hopefully that'll be done by next week. Liam Scales is due to sign from Shamrock Rovers. They're playing Tallinn in the Conference League tonight. So that's either going to happen after that game, so in the next couple of days, or that's going to happen next week after they finish out that second leg. And Georgios Giakoumakis, I think that's how you pronounce his name. I broke it down. He is a striker who's due to be signing in the next couple of days as well. So it seems that triple signing, add player to the squad, without going into too much detail because we're running out of time here, guys. Essentially what Andrew saying after the game, these aren't replacements, these are enforcements to back up the squad is already here because you need them. We have probably 17 players that can start all together in the squad. So Alan, your thoughts on these players coming in and sort of the what they're going to bring to the team?
Yeah, I mean, apart from the Croatian right back, who obviously, they played in the Euros, I won't pretend I know a huge amount over and beyond what goes on in Twitter now, where there is just no end of people who do wonderful research and give you videos and graphs and scouting reports on these players within seconds of them being mentioned. It's quite phenomenal. It's fantastic. So, very informative as well. Juranovic looks like a very attacking fullback. So whereas, Barisic, for example, who obviously plays in the Scottish League as well, I would say I would classify him as being a very solid citizen, a good all-round player, good defender, solid, strong, decent pace. Juranovic looks more of an attacking, creative type of fullback. The skills I don't know a lot about, really. I could be very cruel and say most players in the League of Ireland either get hoovered up in their teenage years. Yeah. But players develop all at different ages. So I think you need to look at the data again and look at the performances. And in fact, there seems to be a bit of a move towards us buying more seasons. Probably the wrong word, but that. Whereas previously it was in that sort of, almost 19, 20, 21 bracket. We're now moving into 23 to 26 bracket, which I think is quite interesting. And then the Greek striker lad, I do not know. I did read an article about him, which I'm desperately trying to find, which more or less, I'm not. I might have got this wrong, but I don't know if he was the one that he was either a winger or maybe even a midfielder or something. And suddenly someone decided that they were going to play him as a striker. He's just been absolutely incredible since. I don't know if it's the same player. I might be completely making that up, but I'll have a look. But yeah, I don't know a lot about him. I'll be honest with you. But what is interesting is that if they're going to buy a striker, obviously you would think then that there's going to be space made somewhere. Because I don't think we only play one striker generally. So what's going to happen? Griffiths and Ajeti aren't getting a lot of minutes, are they? So let's see what happens there.
Yeah, if he's Georgios Samaras 2.0, I'm all for it because, again, cult hero, probably not the best player in the world. I will say with Liam Scales, I mean, look at Jamie McGrath for St. Mirren. I know St. Mirren's a different level, but he came in and he was there. He's their best player of the year last year, scored a heap of goals from midfield. Liam Scales is a different type of player, I would say, from watching him in the League of Ireland. He is a left centre back. I know people have been quick to remind me of that, but he has been playing left wing back for Shamrock Rovers over the last probably about 7 or 8 months since their starting left back got injured, and he's he did really well at left wing back. He's a strong, big guy. He's tall, strong, athletic, really quick. I'd say I'd put him in athletic before I'd put him in skillful, but I mean he's good on the ball as well. Shamrock Rovers, League of Ireland is a different standard, but Shamrock Rovers are the dominant team. They play the same way as Celtic are expected to play in the league. As we lose James, I think his internet may have gone there.
This was lost power. I'd listen, Enda. The idea of having a 6'4" rampaging left back, it sounds brilliant to me. That sounds great fun. I'll be well up for that.
I think he's going to go good. I don't think he's going to be an immediate starter, but I think he has the potential to go there. James has texted in to say he just had a power outage in his house, so hopefully everything's okay over. He's in Pennsylvania, isn't he? Pennsylvania. Yeah. Hopefully everything's okay over there. But I guess that is a good time to end the show. This has been the Huddle Breakdown. Like I said, we have done a little bit of a revamp on the YouTube channel. It's now Breakdown Inc. You can follow us on Twitter. The Breakdown Inc. is the name of the Twitter account. You can follow us on Twitch as well. We're going to be bringing you a few different shows. The Monday Agenda, the Huddle Breakdown will be the flagship show. We'll be here every week looking at these games, and we have a couple of shows as well that aren't Celtic related coming up on the channel in the next couple of weeks as well. So stay tuned for those. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. You can get this on podcast as well on iTunes and Spotify as well. Alan, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
My thanks to Juco James as well for his time. We will be back again. Hopefully Celtic will get through this AZ Alkmaar second leg as they take them on in the Europa League playoffs. They are taking on St. Mirren this Saturday, so hopefully there's a win there as well. Probably rest a few bodies as well. So enjoy the game this Saturday, and we'll chat to you next week. Good luck.